Happy opening day and welcome to the PFF NFL show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman right here. Dalton, first day of the MLB season. Obviously, you're a diehard Mets fan. We got to talk about the wide receiver rankings today. But first off, before we start, what do you think for the Mets this year? Do you think World Series this year? Maybe they get over the hump with Juan Soto. You still Juan Soto for my Yankees. What do you think for the New York Mets?
It'll be tough to beat the Dodgers for sure. There's certainly high expectations after the way last year went, but it's going to take a lot to beat the Dodgers. So I would certainly expect to get back to the NLCS again, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, you mentioned it. That's the fun part is we have Juan Soto and you don't. So
it
feels good.
I'm not very happy about that. It's going to be a tough year for the Yankees this year. But like I said, I don't even matter for the Dodgers the way they look this year. But not talking about the MLB season right now. We're talking about the 2025 NFL Draft and talking specifically about the wide receiver class in the 2025 NFL Draft. And go over Trevor's top 10 wide receivers in this year's draft, go over some team fits for some of the top wideouts in this year's draft, and go over, of course, some sleepers for the 2025 NFL wide receiver class. Let us know in the chat what you think about these rankings. Who are some of your sleepers? There is a guy who already threw in a sleeper, Dalton, that I agree with, and I'm going to be shouting him out later on. So shout out to Heartbroken Hog, because I think Andrew Armstrong is a really good player. We'll get to him later on in the show. But let's start off, before we do, with PFF Plus and why it's so important for you guys to get a subscription to it, because every single player we're breaking down here on this show, we're going to use PFF exclusive stats with that player. All of those stats are available to you guys at subscribe.pff.com for every stat on every player in the NFL, in college football, in the 2025 NFL Draft, and every team in the NFL and college football as well. And, of course, access to our 2025 NFL Mock Draft Simulator, where you could draft every single player we're talking about today for your favorite team using that Mock Draft Simulator. Let's start at the top of this wide receiver class, Dawn, with a guy who's been kind of polarizing for a lot of people in this year's draft, but we both love him, and Trevor loves him as well. He's the number 3 overall prospect on his big board. That is Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. What do you like about him?
It feels like there's some overthinking going on right now with McMillan, right? What do you like about him? The way he moves at 6'5" is rare, and I think you look at a guy who can make those contested catches. He's a better separator than you think. He's now better after the catch than you think he is. He was among the nation's leaders in missed tackles forced this season, and usually those bigger guys, they don't move like that after the catch, right? They're possession receivers. You know, you even think about a guy like at the very top of the scale like a Mike Evans, or you think about a T. Higgins when you think of those big receivers, but McMillan, I think, has the talent to be of that caliber of player. I've been saying it for a while. I think over the last year and a half, I do see some similarities to those guys, and you're talking about number 1 receivers, or T. Higgins, maybe the best number 2 receiver in football, and I really don't understand lately when we've seen mock drafts drop him into the late teens or even the 20s. I don't know. I don't know if he should get outside the top 8, honestly. I think if he's sitting there for Carolina at number 8, it should be a serious thought to get Bryce Young, that big number 1 receiver. Dallas at 12, maybe if you're looking at the next one in line there. But Tet's, I think, a special talent. And what you've seen the last year and a half is the best vertical receiver in college football, right? The highest receiving grade on 10-plus yard targets in college football. You'd expect that. Again, 6'5", 220 glides. He ran, a 4.5 is reported, somewhere in the 4.5s. That's plenty good enough for a guy that size. So I think there's a lot of overthinking going on right now. Oh, this is just another big receiver that can't separate. The separation got better, especially against single coverage this year. Could use a little more work, against press coverage and getting off the line of scrimmage, but even then, it's a minor flaw that he can fix. I fully believe in McMillan's talent. I think he's a top 8 talent in this draft.
I agree with that. I think Tet McMillan is a guy that I would compare more to like a Drake London, or maybe, like you said, a T. Higgins before, rather than a Mike Evans, because he's a little skinnier than Mike Evans. He's 6'5", 212 pounds, but this guy has been incredibly productive in college football over his entire career. In fact, over the last 2 years, he has over 2,700 receiving yards. That's the most in the nation. And he has 35 contested catches over the last 2 years. Again, the most in the nation. 62% contested catch rate. People talk about contested catches as like 50-50 balls. If you're 50-50 on contested catches, that's really damn good. It really isn't like 50-50 balls. He's over 60% on contested catches. And then, like you mentioned, he was dynamic after the catch this year. He broke 29 tackles after the catch. The only wide receiver who broke more is a guy we'll talk about in just a second. That's Luther Burden III. And his trump card is his yak ability. Ted McMillan's trump card is not his yak ability, and yet he still had the second most broken tackles in the nation after the catch as well. So, again, I don't think he has true top-end speed, but 4.5 is plenty good enough at his size. He'll never be really an elite separator. I think he could add a little bit more weight to his frame as well, and there have been some drop issues this past year. He had over a 7% drop rate, which is 47th percentile. So it wasn't an issue in his last 2 years, so I'm not really worried about that, but I don't think there's a lot to dislike in his game right now. Elite size, really strong hands. He could win in most contested situations. He displayed a very, very good yak element this year as well. Again, he'll never be an elite separator. That's not what you want him to be either. It's not what you're expecting out of him either. So he's a plug-and-play X receiver in the NFL, and I would consider him even as early as like number 4 overall to the Patriots.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about a guy with this build and this level of athleticism, you're talking about a quarterback's best friend. And it's something even you mentioned New England, Mike Vrabel alluded to. We kind of need a receiver who can reel in off-target throws. Nobody better in this draft with that than Tetairoa McMillan. I think, again, to me, a top 8 talent in this draft. Trevor has him 3rd on the board. I think if he gets into the mid to late teens or even the 20s, there's going to be some teams that regret passing him up.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to Trevor's number 2 wide receiver in the 2025 NFL Draft, and that is Luther Burden III, the wide receiver from Missouri. A little bit of a disappointing year for Burden this past year. Wasn't as good as he was as a true sophomore. He had 500 fewer receiving yards this past year. I think a lot of that could have been due to Brady Cook falling off a cliff in terms of his efficiency, and also the play calling at Missouri wasn't as good as it was in years past. But I like Burden a lot, man. I think, like I said before, he's probably the best yards after catch receiver in this year's class. He has over 1,000 yards after the catch over the last 2 years, 4th among all receivers in the nation, 30 broken tackles this past year. That led the country, like I said before, as well. Really strong frame at 5'11", 208 pounds. He's only 4 pounds lighter than Tet McMillan, despite being half a foot shorter than Tet McMillan. He's a very, very strong receiver, and he has a 54 contested catch rate over the last 2 years. He's pretty good with strong hands and really good athleticism, and he won consistently against man and zone coverage. Now, I think there is some route running refinement that's needed with Luther Burden III right now. Sometimes I look at he's overthinking when he's running his routes, and he's kind of used mostly as a slot receiver as well, but I think he's an offensive weapon for a team, a lot like a Deebo Samuel out there. Very, very dangerous with the ball in his hands, but he's more than just a yak receiver. He showed off really good hands as well, can win in 50-50 situations. He's an ideal Z receiver for a team, and I think if he refines his route running a little bit, he could be a really, really good receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the yak ability is what jumps out first and foremost. He's built like a running back, and just like, a Deebo Samuel or a DJ Moore, like you mentioned, this is somebody with the ball in his hands who essentially is a running back, right? So you're talking about screens and yards after catch. I think about those Shanahan offenses that emphasize yards after catch. I think Luther Burden would be an absolute ace in those schemes, and then he's got that 4.41 speed that can take you over the top too. So the combination of attacking all levels of a defense when you're talking about the screen game, the short game, and getting yards after the catch, and then the deep balls, which is something we saw more of. You mentioned Brady Cook and the lack of accuracy this year. It's something we saw more of in 2023. Luther Burden as that vertical threat, especially in the first half of the year before I believe he turned an ankle and was kind of battling that later in the year. But Burden is a threat at all levels. You mentioned it. Some refinement still needs to be added to his game, but you know how talented he is as a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. Now he just got to continue to show it, continue to find ways to get the ball into his hands, right? That's all it really comes down to, is anywhere on the field, this is somebody who can make plays happen with the ball in his hand. So I think Burden, to me, I think a clear first-round talent, still a dynamic player, and you just have to refine the route running a little bit and get him, I think, again, in one of those Shanahan offenses in the same way that Deebo's operated. We've seen some other yards after catch guys when that gets emphasized, man. I think that is where Burden's going to succeed early on, right, as you work on the routes, is the deep ball and then yards after catch, the screen game, and any dynamic way you can get the ball into his hands in these modern offenses the way they do it now. I think Burden can be really good in the NFL. He's super talented.
Definitely. He ran a 4.41 at the NFL Combine as well. He's got all the tools to succeed. I think just a little more refinement as a route runner, and he could be a really, really good player in the NFL. So just an offensive chess piece for a team, again, a lot like Deebo Samuel. Let's get to the guy who won the Heisman Trophy this past year at Dalton. That is Travis Hunter from Colorado. Obviously, we'll talk about him in our cornerbacks episode as well, as one of the top corners in this year's draft. But let's stick to the offensive side of the football. What does Travis Hunter bring as a wide receiver to the NFL?
I think he brings everything. I have him number one on my list of wide receivers, even for as much as I love McMillan. I think Hunter, just the athleticism, the ball skills, he has arguably the best hands in this class as well. He goes up and makes contested catches. I think obviously the route running is going to be, even more refined if he were to play the position full time, but he certainly knows what he's doing out there. And I think the other thing that continues to get lost with Hunter is the extremely high-level football IQ, not only to play both sides of the ball, but I think, to me, when I watch him, he uses his understanding of coverages playing the defensive side to win on the offensive side, right? When you talk about finding the holes in zone coverage or getting off the ball and beat guys man-to-man, and, a lot of times in man situations, he is just more athletic than the guy across from him because he's a special player. But I think when you're talking about the ball skills, and he's another one, the after-the-catch ability is just ridiculous. And I think not only is he physically gifted, but he has such an idea of what he wants to do next with the football in his hands right after the catch. It's almost like his spatial awareness and just his ability to find holes in the defense after the catch to make big-time plays. Look, you know me. You run out of good things to say about Travis Hunter because there's just so many of them. But I think full-time, as a wide receiver, if a team were to go that route, I do think he would be one of the best receivers in football. I think the way he moves at times on offense is similar to a Justin Jefferson. I really do. He's that special an athlete. If he focused on one side or the other, I think he could be an all-pro on either side. And at receiver, a dynamic player. I mean, somebody, the only criticism I would say is you're talking about a guy who's, around 175 pounds, not going to give you much in the run blocking, and he's not all that physical, maybe at the beginning through press coverage. But even then, I mean, it's somebody you take a gamble on, whether it's a receiver or a corner. I would argue he's the best receiver in this draft, or at least the most talented. And I mean, look, these are the reasons he's going to go top 5, because he can do either or at an elite level and possibly both.
Yeah, he plays around 185, and he checked into the combine around 188. So at least around 190 is good enough, I would say, at his size. Maybe a little more strength would be needed for him. But like you said before, man, elite ball skills. I mean, just the best ball skills in this class. Makes him jaw-dropping catches due to his hands and due to his athletic ability and his bounce, honestly. He has a 1.8% drop rate over the last 2 years, 64% contested catch rate over the last 2 years as well. He won the Heisman Trophy, won the Bolitnikoff Award as the top receiver in America this past year. 89 receiving grade, was 6th in the country. He had the 3rd most receiving yards in the country. Only Ted McMillan and Jeremiah Smith, who we talk about a lot for the 2027 NFL Draft, they're the only ones who had more in the Power 4 this past year. And Travis Hunter led the Power 4 with 15 receiving touches as well. Again, while playing full-time two sides of the ball. So he still was one of the best receivers in America despite being a full-time cornerback as well. Now, again, could add a little bit of size to his frame. He's about Chris Olave's size, I would say, right now. He didn't always find the soft spots in zone coverage as well as some other guys in his class did. I still think there's a yak element he could add a little bit more to his game, but he is dynamic, like you said, after the catch. But, man, Travis Hunter is a really, really unique prospect, man. He's a top 10 caliber player as either a wide receiver or as a cornerback, and the reason why he's number 1 overall in the PFF Big Board is because he's both at a very, very high level. Excellent athlete with elite ball skills and elite hands. Again, can get a little more physical after the catch, maybe a little more physical as a blocker, but if he's playing two sides of the way, man, that's really all you can ask for out of Travis Hunter. So I think he could be a really, really high ceiling as just a wide receiver or just a cornerback. And if he plays both ways at even like a good level, he's already one of the most valuable players in the NFL, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of the most fascinating draft cases we've ever seen, because there's never been a player like this. And there's been guys who have, they've done the moonlight thing both ways. Even in college, they've had some. Obviously, we talk about Champ Bailey and Charles Woodson and guys like that. But what Hunter just did, especially this past season, winning the Heisman as a two-way superstar, it's special. So, I mean, you don't pass up special athletes like that in the top 5. And I think whatever team gets him on either side of the ball or both, I think you give him a shot to play both a decent amount and see what happens. You're getting a special football player.
Our director of content, Gordon McGinnis, in the chat says, I think Travis Hunter should go number 1 overall. He said, I get why the Titans won't do it because they need a quarterback, but he personally would take Travis Hunter over Cam Ward. What would you think about that?
He's number 1. He'd be number 1 on my big board. He's number 1 on this big board. I think that's the idea, is that, quarterbacks aside in a vacuum, he's the most talented football player here. I mean, you get 2 players in one, or you get so many outcomes where you could still get an all-pro player and still use this guy even part-time. If you're talking he's a part-time receiver, if Travis Hunter is your 3rd receiver, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So I mean that's where it's at. I do get it. I do get why we're likely going to see Cam Ward going first, but I agree he's the best football player in this draft.
So according to PFF's wins above replacement metric that we have, quarterbacks on average are about 4 times more valuable than any other position in football, which is why you see them, of course, get paid the most money in the NFL and always get picked at first in the NFL draft. However, with Travis Hunter's case, wide receiver and corner, I think, are second and third in terms of value. If you get a wide receiver and a corner in Travis Hunter, all of a sudden, he's nearly as valuable as the top quarterbacks in the NFL. So not only do I think Travis Hunter, if he plays both ways and plays the way he did both ways in college, not only would he be the most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL, I think all of a sudden you're talking about him as one of the most valuable players in the NFL, quarterbacks included.
If he were to do it at that level, absolutely. And then you're raising a question here, and we'll see where the next 4 or 5 years go about a second contract and what that might look like, right? When you think about, okay, right now, yeah, Jamar Chase gets $40 million a year now, right? But think about that. What if Jamar Chase also was a superstar corner?
Yeah.
Then what's he worth? Is he worth 50 or 60 or where are we getting at here? Again, it's so much fun to watch with Hunter because it's so unprecedented. We've never seen anyone do it at that level. And again, even doing it as part of a winning effort in 2 years that turned around a Colorado program that was the worst in the Power 5 2 years ago. So, he's just, again, I run out of good things to say about him because he's just a freak. You just don't, certain guys are different. He said it himself at his combine presser. He goes, I'm just different. This is how we do it. So, special player, I think, in the argument for wide receiver 1 in a vacuum, even just without all the other defensive stuff we're talking about. But you don't pass up athletes like this early on, and he's going to go top 5.
It's just the fact that, the top corners are making, $30 million a year now. Top wide receivers are making, now Jamar Chase making $40 million a year. Like, if Travis Hunter is one of the best at both of them, I mean, you're talking about like a $60 million a year player or more.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun experiment, and we'll see in the future if anybody else can try to replicate it or if he's just that different.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to another guy in this class, though, and I'm a big fan of. That is Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. This guy is as refined of a route runner as you're going to find in this 2025 NFL draft. It's a smooth player overall. He knows how to get open against man or zone coverage. 86% career separation rate. It's in the 95th percentile of all wide receivers. Only a 5% drop rate in his career, as well as very, very strong hands. Pretty good in contested situations as well, with a 54% contested catch rate in his career, and good size overall, 6'1", 202 pounds. Now, has largely been used as an underneath receiver for Ohio State in the short and intermediate game. Not much of a deep threat there. Doesn't really have the top end speed to really kill a defense. He's solid after the catch, but not necessarily the most dynamic player after the catch. And of course, he's been mostly used as a slot receiver at Ohio State. It's kind of unknown whether or not he could win on the outside in the NFL, but as high floor of a player as you're going to find in this wide receiver class. He knows how to get open against man or zone coverage. Really strong hands for the position. Again, he'll not be much of a downfield threat, but he should eat underneath as likely a team's number 2 receiver in the slot. So big fan of Emeka Egbuka, and one of the most important traits I look for when scouting wide receivers is, can you get open? Emeka Egbuka can get open as one of the highest rates in college football over the last few years. So I'm a big fan of him. I think he should be a first-round pick.
Not only can he get open, but even when he's not, I find that he's so comfortable even in tight spaces, right? When you talk about those possession receivers and guys, you talk about contested catches, a lot of times people think about jump balls, right? And, end zone fades and things like that. The catches that T. Higgins or Tetairoa and McMillan make. Well, for Egbuka, when you talk about a high contested catch rate, it's in traffic over the middle. Mm-hmm. It's with linebackers bearing down on him. It's with people in deep quarters driving down on in routes and things like that. And, I was talking to somebody about Egbuka yesterday, actually, and the more I thought about it, I think to me the way to describe him is a coach's best friend. Because he's just willing to go out there and do anything it takes to win a ball game. If he's
good blocker.
If he's an excellent blocker, he's somebody, you think about Sean McVay using Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua as, those condensed formation extra run blockers. Egbuka is very much willing to do that. He's willing to run shorter routes if you have another vertical receiver like a Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, right? He just always understands his role. And he's somebody who just makes your football team better, right? Like, I don't think this is somebody who would ever, lead the league with 1,800 yards receiving or anything like that, right? But you're talking about somebody who, maybe he's closer to a 1,000-yard receiver, but super reliable. Clutch situations, third downs, contested tough catches over the middle, just a little bit of everything that goes into it with Egbuka. I think he's somebody in that late teens or early 20s range who there's certain teams that really need to think about it. We're going to talk about some team fits in a minute, so I have one for Ibuka that I like. But no, I mean, he's somebody, though, that I think it's almost with his skill set and as much as he can do in motion around. Chip Kelly did a great job of using him in all different ways to mess with formations and motions and get him in spots where he could find his way open and putting him, I mentioned during the college season on our show, like and subscribe, that, putting him on the same side of the field as a guy like Jeremiah Smith, it's so dangerous because Ibuka just knows where to be at all times. So this is, you mentioned it, a really high floor football player. I think somebody who could make any of the 32 teams better. I mean that. I think he's scheme proof. I think he's going to come in and just kind of acclimate himself to whatever offense he's in and play the role that he needs to play.
I'm not sure if they'll still take him now, but I think Emeka Egbuka, and you didn't have this as your team fit, but I think the Ravens would be a really, really fun fit for him. With how good of a blocker he is and playing the slot and all that. Yeah.
The Ravens, the Rams, there's another one I'm going to talk about in a bit. I don't want to spoil it, but I really believe he's the type of player that all 32 teams would like to have, and they could all find a role for him because he's willing to play any role in an offense. If it's in the slot, if it's the Z, if it's outside running one-on-one, if it's blocking, it really doesn't matter. He just wants to be out there playing football.
Definitely. One of the most reliable receivers in this year's draft and one of the best separators in this year's draft, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Now, we've known about Egbuka since his true freshman year at Ohio State. He's been excellent for 3 years, really, or 4 years, at Ohio State. One guy, Dalton, who had a massive breakout year this past year was Matthew Golden from Texas, transferring in from Houston, has a big breakout year. Now, all of a sudden, for some people, is the top receiver in this year's draft. What do you like about Matthew Golden?
Feet, more feet. I think there's certain things you evaluate. 3 things I always look at when scouting guys. Hands, feet, and eyes. Doesn't matter what position. And it's Golden's feet that jump out the most. First of all, everyone knows about the 4.29 40 he ran at the Combine, right? And sometimes it didn't always look like that. I thought I was most impressed with his ability to stop and start. When he gets a clean release off the line of scrimmage, he can stop on an absolute dime. I mean, he is a fantastic route runner. If he gets a clean release, I think he's somebody who can move around the formation, have him off the ball, get him away from press coverage situations because that's where he struggles. He's not the most physical guy. He's kind of light, but you're talking about a dynamic route runner, somebody with really nice body control, especially around the sidelines. I think he's just somebody who's so light on his feet again and finds a way to make tough catches even though he doesn't have the biggest frame. So Matthew Golden, I think when you're talking about the combination of vertical ability and then the ability to stop on a dime underneath all of that and run corners off and then separate himself. You talk about comeback routes and out routes and things of that nature in the intermediate game where he can just stop on a dime so quickly. This is somebody who I don't know if he's a number 1 receiver because he's not all that physical. I think press man is a little bit of an issue for him, but when he gets a clean release, his feet are so dangerous, and you're definitely going to see somebody for that reason take him in the first round somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said before, big breakout year for Matthew Golden. Had nearly 1,000 yards this year. He combined for 1,000 yards in his 2 years at Houston before this. Really good athlete, as evidenced by his 4.29 40 that he ran at the Combine. He beat man and zone coverage at a really, really efficient level. Good guy in contested catch situations as well. Reliable hands, making some incredible grabs. He had like a one-handed catch, I remember, in the college football playoff that was outrageous. So really, really good hands for Matthew Golden. He's solid after the catch as well, despite being targeted mostly as a downfield receiver. Willing blocker, I thought Matthew Golden was as well. And also, he dealt with subpar quarterback play at Houston and even this past year at Texas. It wasn't really the best year for Quinn Ewers either, and Matthew Golden still had a really good year. So only 1 year of top-end production for Matthew Golden, but again, you can explain that a little bit by the situation he had down there at Houston. He's more solid, I think, than spectacular in a lot of areas. Doesn't really have a true trump card, I don't think, but still some work to do as a separator, but like I say, he's really, really good footwork overall and pretty decent size at 6 feet tall and 195 pounds, but not a lot of glaring holes in Matthew Golden's game, honestly. He's really, really solid all around, really good athlete, good enough size for the position. I don't know if he'll ever be a number 1 receiver in the NFL, but he could be a really good long-term number 2 as a guy who gets open and can win downfield as well.
Especially in a vertically oriented offense, I think about, I don't know if we have this down anywhere, but when you're talking about, say, maybe the Seattle Seahawks could be an option for him. When you talk about Clint Kubiak and Sam Darnold trying to take those deep shots, I think that's somebody they could look at 18.
Absolutely. So we have a super chat right now, Dawn, in the chat from Michael Kensel asking, 1, where would you draft Tet McMillan and Emeka Egbuka in Dynasty 12-team leagues? And he goes, same for Jalen Royals, Jalen Noel, and Alec Ayamatter as well. So Actually, we have the great Nathan Yonke put out dynasty rankings over at PFF.com. So go check that out if you want. But he has Ted McMillan, number 35 overall, and the number 16 wide receiver in the dynasty ranking. So number 35 overall, 12 teams going to be like, a late third-round pick? For Dynasty, whereas Emeka Egbuka on this one as well. But yeah, I think that'd be a good pick. And then number 49 overall for Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver 25, Nathan Yonke has as well. So I would check out that article for all the Dynasty rankings, because Nathan obviously does fantasy football at a way higher level than either of us do. In fact, I almost base all of my fantasy decisions off of Nathan Yonke and what he tells me to do, honestly. So check out that article if you want. But yeah, all those guys are ranked in that article. So go check out that article, available at PFF.com. All right, next guy we're talking about, Dalton, is Alec Ayamaner, the guy that Michael was actually asking about earlier. So what do you like about Alec Ayamaner, and why is he one of the top receivers in this class?
Kind of a little bit of everything, right? He's got size, he's got speed, he's tough. When I watch Alec, I see a little bit of Michael Thomas from the old Saints, not the old Saints days. It was only a couple of years ago that he was shredding the league for arguably the best first 4 years of a career for a receiver ever. But I just think he gives you a little bit of everything. He's really physical. In the run blocking game, he can get really physical. He can get off press coverage. You saw that against Syracuse earlier this year.
Stop.
I had to throw it in there.
God.
But, I just think you're talking about a guy 6'2", 210, really good hands, just again a reliable receiver. If you're not in the range to get Tetairoa and McMillan, I think probably early in the second round, Alec Ayamaner can be. He's not as big as McMillan, but he can be a really nice alternative as just a solid, fundamentally sound receiver. And you're talking about somebody who had all of the success that he did the last 2 years, including putting up 294 yards on Travis Hunter in Colorado in that game in 2023, and he did. That was the one game we saw Travis Hunter really get torched, was against Ayamaner, but he had all this success and he's got all this talent. He came from Stanford, and they were honestly, the rest of the team was just awful. They just couldn't put anything else together on offense. It was a rough quarterback situation. The entire team, it was tough, but he found a way to succeed anyway. He's a really smart dude. He's got great size. He's strong. He's got good speed to get vertical. You just get a little bit of everything out of him. Honestly, I think that's what you're getting at here, and you just love to see him in a better situation in the NFL, right? Better than what he had at Stanford, where he found a way to succeed anyway. Now, talk about, okay, let's get to a better team, a more functional, just showing here, right? In the NFL, on an NFL team with a functional offense, and see where this goes, because I think he could be a really darn good receiver.
There are some receivers that can be classified as divas in past history. Alec Ayamaner is the complete opposite of that. I actually I was lucky enough to interview Alec recently. It's actually available on the PFF College Football Show, so go check out that interview. This guy, really, really smart football player, really, really smart human being. Obviously goes to Stanford, so you got to be smart to go to Stanford. He served as an internet analyst at Altamont Capital, which is a financial consulting firm as well. So that he talked to me more about that than he did about football as well. So guy that loves, obviously just everything in life, honestly. More than just a football player, and one of the smartest people I've ever talked to. And Dalton, I asked him, what's your favorite play of your whole career? And I expected the one where he told me, okay, when I skied over Travis Hunter, probably a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, and made a catch on his helmet that was on SportsCenter top 10. It was the number one play on SportsCenter top 10. He goes, no, my favorite play was as a redshirt freshman, I cracked down on a DB and made a block that sprung my running back for a touchdown. This guy just loves playing football, man. He's more than just a guy who wants the ball in his hands every single play. He wants to do whatever it takes to win football games. So, again, very productive player despite being in one of the worst quarterback situations in the country at Stanford. Does a nice job getting open, especially against zone coverage as well. You mentioned that Colorado game last year. It's really where he kind of broke out for everyone. He had 0 catches for 0 yards in the first half. In the second half and overtime, 13 catches, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns. Program record against, and most of it was against Travis Hunter as well. So Alec Ayamaner is a really, really fun player, really good athlete as well as a really, really athletic player. Now, he's not as good of a separator one-on-one, not much of a yak threat as a redshirt sophomore. He had fewer than 4 yards after the catch per reception and over an 8% drop rate in his career, but he's got a bright future on the field and a bright future off the field as well. Again, as cerebral as they come at wide receiver, and he has all the athletic traits to bet on at wide receiver as well. Again, he's not much of a separator, and he has some drop issues, but he could shine more in the NFL than he did in college because he should get better quarterback play in the NFL. So there's been a lot of guys that we've seen in years past where they're a lot better NFL players than they were in college. I think Alec Ayamaner could be one of those guys.
I was thinking about, because we don't have him in our team fits segment here, but I was thinking one off the top of my head. If the Titans are taking Cam Ward first and then they're picking, I think it's 35, and he's right at 35 on our big board as well, actually, overall. I think Cam Ward might like him in Tennessee. If you had Cam Ward and Alec Ayamaner and Calvin Ridley, I think you'd kind of be working there, right in that 35th spot where we have him on the big board. That might be something to watch there. Or even, we think about, there's been a lot of talk about New England going early, maybe on the offensive line, or if Abdul Carter's sitting there. I think this is somebody in the 30s or no later, I think, than the mid 40s that you're going to see get taken. He's going to get taken early in the second round. The team's going to get a really good player.
Absolutely. So Alec Ayamaner, go check out the interview again on the PFF College Football Show, because he was an awesome kid and could be a really good player in the NFL as well. Next guy we're talking about is Jack Besh from TCU. Dalton, this guy made a ton of money down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He had a fantastic week at the Senior Bowl. Really strong frame at 6'2", 215 pounds, 65% contested catch rate this year. Really strong hands, and one of the best run blockers in this class as well. Only a 1.5% drop rate this year as well. Really good at getting open against zone coverage. Knows how to find the soft spots in zone coverage. Really high IQ player. Decent separator against man coverage as well. And he's used mostly as a slot receiver at TCU. He lined up out wide far more this year and had his best year of his career with over 1,000 receiving yards. You see right there, and 9 touchdowns as well. So I think he's okay after the catch. He's an okay athlete overall, but strong hands, strong knowledge of how to get open. Could be a very effective power slot receiver in the NFL, and I think his run blocking could shine in that role as well.
I've thought about him a bit like Jacoby Myers for the Raiders, who just had his first 1,000-yard season, who's a tough player over the middle of the field. I think you mentioned it. Very strong hands, excellent hands, and like I mentioned with Emeka Egbuka, excellent concentration in tight spaces and in contested situations. We saw that competitiveness, like you mentioned, down in Mobile, and there was a lot of really good receivers down there. Tej Johnson, Restrepo, the 2 Iowa State guys, but I think it was a consensus that week, Jack Besh was clearly the best receiver on the field. He's, like you mentioned, the pre-draft process has been great to him. He had a fantastic season this year at TCU. His prior days at LSU, he was good when he was on the field. They just didn't put him on the field that much.
It's hard to get on the field against LSU and Malik Neighbors.
That's true. When you talk about Neighbors and Thomas and those guys, but when he did get on the field, he was still productive. I think I look at Besh very much in the same way that I look at Emeka Egbuka. I think he can play a lot of roles for you. You mentioned even the run blocking, the competitiveness, the contested catches, and just the ability in general. I think he's a really good zone coverage beater. I think he has a really good idea of what he's doing and the ability to find space. So you're talking about a guy, I think, with the potential to be a very reliable number 2 receiver. I think I look at him like Jacoby Myers. You might think about those players you mentioned, those power slot guys. Ibuka could be one of them, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's a higher level of it, right? But that role that even Cooper Kupp has played for the Rams in past years, where I think that's a role that Besh can fit in. Get him somewhere between a Z and that power slot role. He can do a lot of things to help your offense succeed.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to another Big 12 wide receiver. That is Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. What do you like about him?
I'll tell you what. I mean, the more I watch him, I'm like, he's a lot more like T. Higgins than I thought. And I was watching I went back on him again the other day because he keeps rising up boards. It feels like he keeps rising up. At 6'4" and 214, Max, his releases off the line are ridiculous. And usually sometimes those guys don't have quick enough feet, right, to get off the line. And even though they're playing against smaller corners in press coverage, so often for these bigger receivers, the answer is, well, let me just shove them off and see if I can get away with an OPI on a lot more plays than I should, right? But he's got enough finesse in his game that he can get himself open off the line of scrimmage. Really good route runner. Fantastic hands. Just fantastic hands. I think it's only 4 drops, I think it is, in the last 3 years. Is that the number that I remember? Contested, obviously at 6'4", 214, he's going to be able to make contested catches. And yeah, he may not run the fastest 40, right? I think also like McMillan, somewhere in the 4.5s, but an understanding, a deep understanding of how to get himself open, right? And I think we saw even the first day or so at the Combine where it was, can he get himself open? And then he started getting a groove as the week went on, right? I think that's what he does is he gets in a groove, he gets the release package going, and I do like, what I like on vertical routes with him when he runs go routes? Because a lot of times you think about tall guys running go balls, okay, chuck him a jump ball, but he has this understanding not only about how to create separation vertically, but knowing how to use the space he has horizontally between himself and the sideline to create some horizontal separation and allow the quarterback to throw the ball over that outside shoulder. Jaden Higgins is a really fundamentally sound player at 6'4", 214. I think this is somebody, and I think T. Higgins went in the second round as well. This is somebody who could be very similar as that classic X, really good number 2 receiver. If you've got some of these Z receivers that we've been talking about with some of these other guys, Higgins is a fantastic complement. I think there's a ton of teams. I'll have one in particular later on that I'll talk about with him as well. But boy, there's not a lot of places he wouldn't fit in because you don't get a whole lot of guys beyond, obviously, Tetairoa, McMillan. You've got Iamainer, but what Higgins does at his size, I mean, he's off the charts fundamentally. I think he's a lot better route runner than people give him credit for, or even I gave him credit for during the season. And obviously, he can make all the contested catches he can at 6'4".
He's 6'4", 214 pounds, and he ran a 4.47 in the 40-yard dash. That's
plenty.
Blazing for a 6'4" receiver.
For a guy his size to hit 4.47, I forgot you're right. He did crack 4.4. I mean, he's got it all. I mean, it's a wonder. We have him at 49, but you have to wonder if he's going to go even sooner than that, if he could go ahead of even Iamainer and Besh and a couple guys, because you just don't see guys this reliable and guys move like that at 6'4" very often, in the same way that I talked about McMillan earlier.
And not only is he a really good athlete, he was a really good player for the Cyclones in his entire career. He has a 91.9 receiving grade over the last 2 years. That's tied for third among all receivers in college football in that span. He's 95th percentile against single coverage, 93rd percentile against zone coverage. You won everywhere for the Cyclones in his career. Really good size, obviously at 6'4", 215 pounds, 56% contested catch rate this year, 99th percentile drop rate. Like you mentioned, over the last 3 years, less than 2% drop rate, 1.9% drop rate over the last 3 years as well. So again, he had a solid week at the Senior Bowl after a slower first day, kind of rebounded nicely in that week. He's actually a pretty decent separator despite being a big receiver as well. And he's not much of a threat after the catch, but this is still a guy who's a really good athlete, big-bodied ex-receiver who was great for Iowa State after transferring in from Eastern Kentucky. Physical receiver. He beats press man coverage and zone coverage. Very strong hands as well. Decent separation ability despite being a bigger receiver. I think he's worth a day 2 selection, and he could be a starting ex-receiver for a team as a number 2 or number 3 option. So I'm also a big fan of Jaden Higgins, man. I think he's kind of getting a little underrated in this process right now because big body, who's really athletic and been really productive his entire career.
Oh, no, it's not just day 2. He's worthy of a top 50 selection. I think he's very well going to go in the top 50, and he's somebody who could change. He just changes the look of a receiving core, again, at that size and everything he can do. Just an excellent football player. And, again, it feels like we talk now about every year, receiver classes. They never take a dip. Well, it's because guys like this go in the second round now, apparently, because there were years in the past when Jaden Higgins would have been a first-round pick, and the fact that he's, wide receiver 8 or 9, we have him on the board here, that's ridiculous. I think the only thing really missing from his game is the yards after catch element that McMillan gives you, but as far as everything else is that classic X receiver, you take this guy in the second round.
Absolutely. So one guy who did not run as fast as Jaden Higgins is Xavier Restrepo from Miami. He actually had his pro day just recently, ran a 4.8 at his pro day. Not great for Xavier Restrepo, but you still like him a lot.
Now, there are some rumors, and I don't know where the tweet went, but there was a tweet he had put out earlier this week that apparently sometime early in his workout that his hamstring tightened up and that he had been running in the 4.5s or low 4.6s, somewhere in there. If that's the case, then so be it. We saw something similar with Ohio State's Tyleik Williams, where he had apparently cramped up during his 40 and was going to run well, and obviously you can't take any chances after that, right? You don't want to gamble. So Restrepo kind of stayed on the field and supposedly took the gamble. So I'm taking the 40 time. Maybe he runs it again before the draft and eases everybody's concerns. But either way, I'm not drafting this guy for his 40 time or his size. Anyway, he's not the size speed guy you're talking about. He's a pure slot receiver, 5'10", 200, but boy, is he a dynamic route runner. I just love watching this guy run routes. He knows how to get himself open against man-to-man coverage. You see the 87.6 receiving grade against man coverage. For a guy his size, and I know he's in the slot a lot, that's fantastic. And I think for me, the way he sets up routes, the way he gets in the blind spot of defenders and stays in there, the way he changes up his releases, and just the knowledge on the football field, you can see it. I think he's one of the highest IQ receivers in this draft. I think, he's built in a similar way. Julian Edelman was a little bit faster, but I do think he's a similar player. They're built similarly. Edelman ran a 4.52 when he was coming out of Kent State. I think Restrepo is a plug-and-play slot receiver in the NFL. That's me. Maybe I'm a little higher on him than some other people. And even here on our overall big board at 54, I think that's about right. I would consider him in the second round if I needed a slot receiver like this. He is just a high IQ route runner who just finds he's just one of these guys. We're going to say it with a handful of them. He just knows how to get open. So I'm really, even if 4.7, 4.8 is a little concerning because but he was never the most vertical player at Miami anyway. That's not what I guess I could say this in college now. It's not what they paid him to do. It was only a few years ago I couldn't say that. But no, I think Restrepo to me, is he again a higher floor player than a higher ceiling because of the lack of size and speed? Sure, but I would make him my starting slot receiver tomorrow. Absolutely.
I still like him a lot as well. He's been a really productive player at Miami over the last 2 years. 90.3 receiving grade over the last 2 years. Knows how to get open. He's one of the better separators in this year's class as well. And I thought he did a really nice job in scramble drill situations when Cam Ward or the few times that Tyler Van Dyke scrambled out of the pocket. He presented a target to throw to for Cam Ward and Tyler Van Dyke. And that was kind of an issue for Cam Ward at Washington State where, he would get in those scramble drills and he would make some head-scratching plays because of it because you didn't have anyone to throw to. Whereas Xavier Restrepo kind of presented that target for him and why Cam Ward was really a big reason why he was so efficient this past year. Less than a 4% drop rate over the last 2 years as well. Really reliable hands. Makes some contested grabs as well. He caught 62% of his contested grabs in 2024, and I thought he got a lot better after the catch this year when that was kind of a negative for his tape in 2023. Now, again, he's an okay athlete that kind of showed up on tape as well. Only a 75th percentile gas score or game athleticism score metric. He's not really going to win more than underneath or in the intermediate range, but that's kind of all you want for him to be at the NFL level as well. And I thought he was just okay at the Senior Bowl too, but he could be a starting slot receiver in the NFL. High IQ player, well-rounded game. Again, not the best athlete, doesn't have great size either, but he gets open consistently, and like I said, he's a very high IQ player. So even though he ran a 4.83 at his pro day, like Dalton said, some context might be needed for that time, and he still could be a pretty good slot receiver in the NFL for Xavier Restrepo. So let's go to the next guy, Dalton. That is Tre Harris from Ole Miss. Kind of a guy that's been split for a lot of people. What do you like about Tre Harris, and why are we a little bit maybe lower on him?
So he is certainly an efficient vertical threat, which fits that offense, and we've talked about this with Jackson Dart, how reliant I should say that offense is on the deep ball. But Harris was the best player in this offense, right? You're talking about a guy who's 6'3", 210. Tears up one-on-one coverage. When he gets those single coverage matchups, he can be a load to handle. This is a size speed guy, right? And I think the thing with Harris where I look at it and I go, I'm not sure, is the lack of a route tree, the lack of diversity in his route running, and I don't think he's a fast twitch wide receiver. Now, I would feel better about him had he not gotten hurt and missed most of the second half of the season, in SEC competition and with Ole Miss trying to compete for a playoff spot and things of that nature, because their early schedule was really, really soft, right? But I think he's got pretty good after the catch ability for his size. He is a deep threat once he gets that engine running. Again, I don't think he's explosive off the line of scrimmage, but he is a deep threat with his size and his long speed. So there's going to be some debate about Tre Harris. I do think for his ability, and obviously the production was off the charts. It's over 5 yards per route run this season. Yeah. He was efficient in that offense, just as Jackson Dart was. Harris was the biggest reason for it, but somebody will take him on day 2 based on the potential. I do think I'm a little worried about his route running and even his ability as a bigger guy. I mentioned, like Jaden Higgins is really good with the release package and getting off press coverage. I don't see that as consistently with Tre Harris, right? Which is why I would have, obviously, Higgins ahead of him. Now, some people think Harris could be a top 5 guy. I get it. There's potential there. You go back to the 2023 Texas A&M game. I think he made 4 or 5 contested catches in that game.
He made like 3 one-handers in a row.
Yeah, he was. It's like you look at a game like that and you go, oh, this guy's dominant. And then you look at other times, and again, it's the same way I feel about Jackson Dart in that offense where it's so predicated on just isolating single coverage deep shots. Okay, what else do we have in the bag, right? For a big receiver like Jaden Higgins, I just explained what else he has in the bag. I need to see that for Tre Harris. It could take a little bit of time to develop. There's big potential, but I'm also a little worried about the lack of diversity in his route running.
That's what I'm worried about too with Tre Harris. Now, he is a pretty good athlete, right? He's 6'2", 205 pounds, ran a 4.54 in the 40-yard dash, which is very good enough for that size as well, but like you said, the route running is a question mark. It's not can he do it, or is he able to do it? It's more he hasn't really done it yet, so it's kind of an unknown with him right now because it's not really a diverse route tree that he ran at Ole Miss, and not really a diverse offense at Ole Miss either. But he's a good vertical receiver. Again, very good after the catch as well. Very, very strong player after the catch. He was a go-to player for them over the last 2 years. You mentioned that yards per route run number. That would have set the PFF record if that kept up all year. So he was the go-to guy for Jackson Dart in that offense. Now, again, slow feet out of his release. Does not really get off press coverage as well as he should. And he kind of wins in terms of separation ability with his strength more than his route running. Kind of a lot of push-offs on tape with Trey Harris. But again, he doesn't have the great contested catch numbers either, even though he is capable of making some really, really amazing contested grabs. But it's a question mark with Trey Harris' separation ability because we haven't really seen him do it yet. And he's not really the most agile player either. So I like him as a vertical weapon, but the Ole Miss offense, like it does with Jackson Dart as well, makes it more of a question mark with Trey Harris and just how diverse his route tree can become in the NFL. So I like Trey Harris as a vertical weapon. I'm just a little bit lower on him in what is a pretty deep receiving class.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Somebody will take a chance on him. My best guess right now is that it would be in round 3, maybe late in round 2 he sneaks in there, but I think for a team that misses out on these other X receivers, I think you look at him, I would look at him as a third-round alternative there.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the next guy on this list, the final one of the top 10 receivers for Trevor in this draft, another Iowa State receiver. That is Jalen Noel from Iowa State. So elite track speed, Dalton, 99th percentile gas score. So hard to cover with his speed and his quickness. He's a 98th percentile separation rate over the last 2 years. He has a 92nd percentile against single coverage over the last 2 years as well. Could take the top off of defenses. 609 yards on deep throws in 2024. Led all Power 4 receivers. He has pretty good hands as well. Again, he's okay size at about 5'10", 194. He was okay at the Senior Bowl as well. Kind of a couple drops in that Senior Bowl game. He's okay after the catch, not that physical, but he is a speedy receiver who could take the top off of defenses. One of the best deep threats that we have in this year's draft. He won't add much after the catch and likely won't be more than a slot receiver for a team, but he could be a returner for a team. And like I said, he is so fast. I think he could be one of the best deep threads that we have in this draft.
Yeah, I think it's funny with him because I compare him kind of side by side with Restrepo. They're roughly the same size. So you turn up the speed a little bit. You've got, like you mentioned, more of a vertical threat. And you turn down a little bit of the savvy in the route running and the after the catch ability that Restrepo added in 2024. Noel didn't really add that. So I think he's somebody who doesn't really break tackles. I think it's funny because you usually think of these guys in the slot with speed as, okay, screen guys, gadget guys. It's not really Noel's game. Noel's really a pure route runner. And you know what I liked about him the most, and we talked about it a million times on the college show during the season. Higgins was Mr. Reliable, right? The chain mover, the big safety blanket, 6'4". Jalen Noel was clutch.
Yeah.
Jalen Noel, every time Iowa State needed a big play, it was number 13, Jalen Noel, making it, right? Whether it was down the field, I think it was even in week 1. I mean, first play of Iowa State's season, he takes a ball deep down the seam in double coverage and finds a way to come down with it, right? Or even I can think about big moments late in the game against Iowa that he made a big play beating Sebastian Castro one-on-one, right, on an out and up. I mean, he's just somebody who shows up in big moments. He's a really good route runner, and when he gets in the clear, yeah, he's got dangerous speed. No question about it. You can see it in his tape. He's got speed that can take the top off of defense, whether it's within his route or after the catch. That's where he wants to operate, is as a route runner and with his feet in the open field. And again, I think an underrated player when it comes to his competitiveness over the middle of the field and his ability to just compete and make catches in tight spaces as well. Jalen Noel's a really solid player. Again, if there was somebody who looked at those two side by side and said, I want the speed, I want that explosive element, I get it. Maybe you like him a little better than Restrepo. If you want the savvy and the more detailed route running, you'll take Restrepo. But two really good slot receivers that can help teams immediately.
Yeah, in different ways as well. That's a good point there. And Jalen Noel, back to the speed. On tape, he ran nearly 23 miles per hour on our GPS tracking, and he ran a 4.39 in the 40-yard dash as well. So he's a blazing fast receiver, Jalen Noel is, and he should be a really fun, deep threat in the slot at the NFL. So it wraps up the top 10 receivers in this year's draft, but we're not done just yet. We're going to go over some team fits for some of the top guys in this class and some guys who were outside the top 10 who might be day 3 receivers that we still like a lot in this year's draft. As before we do all of that, we got to talk about the sponsor of the show, and that is Fabric by Gerber Life. What does your child's future success look like to you? A job they're passionate about, traveling around the world, or just being happy and comfortable? Whatever their journey, you can help make it easier to achieve with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life is designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Start with just $20 with no contribution limits, tax advantages, and your funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, no commission fees and just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, let's get into some of the best team fits for some of the top receivers in this year's draft. On who are some of the guys that you think are some of the top receivers, and what teams do they fit at the next level?
Okay, so I'm looking at that 6th overall pick with the Las Vegas Raiders, and lately everybody's been mocking Ashton Jeanty to them. I get it, absolutely. If they do it, I'm not calling it a wrong pick. Jeanty's a freak. The Raiders were last in the league in rushing grade. I'm going to talk about Tetairoa McMillan, though, because I think the choice really is likely to be between these two guys, and I think with Geno Smith as their quarterback now, and as well as he throws the ball vertically down the field, all right? He's been one of the best passers over the last 3 years, throwing at 10-plus yard targets, right? And second in big-time throws in that stretch behind Josh Allen. That's what Geno wants to do. He wants to work vertically, and for as much as I love Jacoby Myers and I love Brock Bowers, they're going to work underneath more often. If you need a vertical receiver, if you want a vertical receiver in Las Vegas right now, Tetairoa McMillan's your guy. I think he can add that exact element. Obviously didn't run. I don't think he's not quite as fast as a DK Metcalf, but that same dynamic where you have that big, dynamic, down-the-field X receiver for Geno Smith to throw to, you can still get running back depth later in this draft, no question. They need running backs. They can find that. Maybe Chip Kelly dips into the Ohio State guys with Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson or both of them somehow. We'll see. But I think McMillan and Geno Smith would be a perfect pairing in Vegas. Again, if they take Ashton Jeanty, I'm not going to complain. I think Ashton Jeanty is also one of the best players in this draft, and they desperately need running back help. But I think McMillan would be the perfect guy to fill out that receiving core in Vegas.
I'm a big fan of that. You give Geno Smith another DK Metcalf-ish receiver, like another big receiver like you had in DK Metcalf and Tet McMillan. I'm saying the comparison for Tet McMillan is DK Metcalf, but you give him a bigger target to throw to in Tet McMillan. I think it's a great call out there. I'm going to go with the number 2 overall pick in the draft, the Cleveland Browns. I think they should take Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter is the best non-quarterback in this year's draft. I don't think Cleveland is in the space right now to take a rookie quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, because it feels like Cam Ward is almost a lock to go number 1 overall to Tennessee. So I don't think they'll go Shedeur Sanders, but I do think they should go with his teammate in Travis Hunter. And honestly, it goes down to Cleveland could improve at both wide receiver and at corner. You look at the Browns receiving core right now. You got Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore, and Michael Woods. Jerry Jeudy was the only guy who graded in the top 80 of PFF graded receiver this past year. So Judy's a good player. I think he's more of like a really good number 2 receiver in the NFL. I don't know if I want him as a true number 1. Other than that, you really got to improve that receiving core. You look at the cornerback room for Cleveland. You got Denzel Ward, you got Greg Newsome, and Martin Emerson. Denzel Ward was the 41st highest graded corner this last year. They didn't have another corner in the top 100 of PFF grading. So you have talking about a team that could use a lot of help at wide receiver and a lot of help at corner, and you have the most unique prospect in NFL history in Travis Hunter, who could help you out at both spots. Again, I don't know if he'll be a full-time player at one or the other, and the Browns already said that they consider Travis Hunter more of a wide receiver than a corner, but you'd be foolish not to try him at both spots in the NFL as well. So I think Travis Hunter, man, going to Cleveland would help them out at 2 very valuable spots, and I would take him with the number 2 overall pick in the draft.
I get it. I absolutely get it. I know lately it's been leaning towards Abdul Carter, or maybe they're thinking about Shedeur Sanders, but again, it's hard to pass on an athlete like that, especially when outside of quarterback, you could argue the Browns' two biggest needs are at receiver and at corner because their secondary, they were top 3 in both run defense grade and pass rush grade, and I believe they were 28th in coverage grade. Would help you there. Receiving, all you really have is Jerry Jeudy out there at wide receiver right now, and you're talking about a guy as talented as Hunter, who Andrew Berry said at the Combine, I view this guy as a receiver. Maybe that plays into it a little bit. We'll see.
Absolutely. So Travis Hunter to the Browns, I said I would do. I'd be hard-pressed to take any non-quarterback over Travis Hunter. I just think he could be, again, one of the most valuable players in the NFL, quarterbacks included, with how good he is on both sides of the ball. What's another team fit that you really like at the receiver class?
All right, this is something I've been preaching lately, and I'm going to stay on it. The Pittsburgh Steelers, look, trade for DK Metcalf. No question, when you add DK Metcalf to your team, it makes your team better. There is conversation, though, about the skill set being a bit redundant to George Pickens. You've got vertical guys. There's no question they're going to want to throw the football down the field. Will it be Aaron Rodgers? Will it not? Will it be Jackson Dart? I don't know who the hell their quarterback is, but either way, they have two really good vertical receivers. I know that 21st overall pick, they've been talking about, maybe a D tackle. We start the Cam Hayward succession plan. Maybe it's Jackson Dart. We figure that out. I would still look at a receiver to diversify this thing. And to me, I think Emeka Egbuka would fit in perfectly. When you talk about somebody, you mentioned it, separating underneath, getting in on the run blocking, doing whatever an offense needs in that underneath game, I think he could get, if he got in this Steelers offense, I think he'd get a boatload of targets. Because right now, the question I get asked most often when I say this is, well, what about Roman Wilson? I go, Roman Wilson and Emeka Egbuka are two completely different players. Wilson, even though he might play in the slot, is a vertical guy, right? Even Calvin Austin is somebody who has speed. He wants to get downfield. They don't have a player like Emeka Egbuka on their team. I think even though they traded for Metcalf, whoever the quarterback may be, if it's Aaron Rodgers, if it's a rookie, I don't know, whoever it's going to be, I think they would greatly benefit from having somebody who can diversify this offense. Because right now I look at it as just constantly, I know they have Pat Freiermuth too, but just constantly everything downfield. And that's the problem last year is when it was working, when the go balls, and you can just chuck up go balls all day, when it works, it's great. High variance though, right? Take some of the variance out of this. Find an underneath target that knows how to separate and help you in the run game for that matter, because Arthur Smith is still going to want to run the ball. I think if Emeka Egbuka was on the board at 21 for the Steelers, that's the guy that I would take.
Yeah, you mentioned before, because when we did our scouting report for Emeka Egbuka earlier on in the video, we mentioned, okay, he's not much of a downfield weapon. That might be a negative for him. In that offense, that's what you want.
I don't need him to be. I don't need him to get beyond 10 yards. I'm good. He can just take everything underneath. He could be the PPR king for somebody who was asking about Dynasty before.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I'm living with Egbuka. He can just pick up first downs while the other two guys wait for their shots downfield.
And before, I would have said the fit of George Pickens and DK Metcalf together with Russell Wilson at quarterback would have been nice, because Russell Wilson's at least one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. Russell Wilson's now a New York Giant, so you don't have that option anymore. And I know Aaron Rodgers might probably still be the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, but he likes throwing the ball underneath too. Emeka Egbuka, like I said before, is a great slot receiver, can get open at a high level, and he brings something different to that Steelers receiving core. When they have two guys who are very, very similar in that receiving core, you at least get a different flavor in Emeka Egbuka. So I love that call as well. Like, again, they're looking for a slot receiver. I don't think a Jalen Noel would fit the Steelers either, right? Because he's more of a downfield weapon like George Pickens and like DK Metcalf is. Emeka Egbuka, I think, is a better fit, or Xavier Restrepo is a better fit as a starting slot receiver.
Even if it was, well, I don't think they have a second round pick now, but even somebody like, if it's not Egbuka, again, I think about alternatives. Okay, a Jack Besh, right? If they were to find a way to get him, somebody who just diversifies it just a little bit. Right? If there's days where they're not running the football well behind their offensive line, and there's days they're not chucking up the go balls, it's the exact reason not only did they lose their last 5 games, but they scored 17 or fewer points in all 5 of those games. You just can't have that much high variance element to your offense.
Absolutely. All right, next guy I'm going to go to is Luther Burden III, and one fit I'd still like him to see at is the Denver Broncos, because Sean Payton at his press conference at the NFL Combine mentioned, okay, we're looking for a joker in this offense. We want a guy who could do everything for us. Well, that is Luther Burden III to a T. Now, I know they added a very versatile tight end already in free agency in Evan Ingram, but I still think Luther Burden III could provide a different element to that wide receiver room that they're kind of don't really have right now with Courtland Sutton and Devon Vele and Marvin Mims, and of course Troy Franklin's still there as well. Luther Burden III could be the guy that you just get the ball in his hands one way or the other, whether it be on the screen, whether it be down the field, whether it be even on handoffs as well. Like I said, his comp is Deebo Samuel, and it sounds like Sean Payton is looking for Deebo Samuel type players in his offense. So Luther Burden III, excellent after the catch, can provide a different element to that Broncos receiving core. I still think he should very much be in play at number 20 overall. Now, it feels like Luther Burden III is kind of falling off boards a little bit. He's right now a projected second-round pick for a lot of people, Dolan. I don't know why he should fall to the second round. I would still take this guy in the first round, and I think at 20 overall to Denver Broncos, he still would fit what sounds like a pretty big need for Sean Payton, still looking for the joker in his offense.
I think the compliment to Bo Nix as a quarterback who does play things a little bit more conservative. Now, Bo Nix had a fantastic rookie year, doesn't turn the ball over much, doesn't beat himself, but he is conservative. He wants to throw the ball underneath. Burden's after the catch ability would fit that perfectly, and I think it'd be a great compliment to Courtland Sutton on the other side. When you talk about Sutton being the vertical threat, you add that's what Sean Payton's looking for. He's trying to make his offense have more layers so they can attack more parts of the field. And when he talks about those jokers, in English, that's matchup problems. And Luther Burden anywhere on the field can cause a matchup problem. You mentioned it. Even just the screen game, I mean, that can help you a lot, right? When you're picking up those yards after the catch or extension of the running game, as the phrase is used so often. I think Burden could really expand what Sean Payton wants to do on offense. I'm with you with that in Denver.
And I like the compliment of him to Courtland Sutton as well.
Sure.
I think it would be a really good compliment. So I still think Luther Burden III, even though it seems like his stock is falling a little bit, I still think he should be in play for the Broncos at number 20 overall. Who is the last team fit that you really like in this draft?
Okay, I'm looking at Jaden Higgins, and I'm looking at big-bodied X that could be had in the second round, possibly early in the second round. And I look at another number of his. This past year, a perfect 99.9 receiving grade on intermediate targets between 10 and 19 yards, which makes sense, right? I mean, you think about, again, in the same mold as, say, a T. Higgins, right, where you're working those deep in cuts and those 12-yard curls, and you're moving the chains and things like that. And I didn't realize, I was just going through and looking at this, I'm like, where would this fit, right? And I didn't realize the team that was dead last in intermediate receiving grade last year was the New York Jets. Now, we've talked about at number 7. They're kind of a wild card. They're a little bit weird at number 7. Could they take a defensive player? Would it be a Mason Graham if he was there? Maybe. Tyler Warren's been mentioned, Armand Membu, Tetairoa, McMillan. But let's say they don't go receiver. Right now, the New York Jets receivers are Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Xavier Gibson, Malachi Corley, and whatever else might be behind. It's really just Garrett Wilson as their only legitimate pass catcher. They have to come out of this draft with pass catchers because, honestly, they're, ironically, because they're both Iowa State guys, they're trying to get rid of Alan Lazard.
Yeah.
And when I think about this now, okay, so let's make a case if you want a defensive player or you want Armand Membu to fill out the 5th spot on that offensive line. They still need pass catchers. So I look early in the second round with the Jets and I go, you know what? Jaden Higgins as the X, as the complement to Garrett Wilson on the other side. With everything Garrett Wilson can do, we know everything Garrett Wilson can do, even with the quarterbacks he's had to play with. Jaden Higgins might actually be the complement they're looking for early in the second round. Intermediate receiver, 6'4". The other guy they have like that is Lazard, and they're trying to get rid of him, and he drops the ball too much. Higgins has really good hands, and that's really actually been a problem for the Jets the last couple of years too, is drops. You don't have to worry about that with Higgins. So that's somebody I might look at if the Jets don't go, because I think if Tetairoa McMillan's on the board, they would think about that too. Obviously, that would work, but I already had McMillan going elsewhere, one spot ahead of them. Higgins, again, as an alternative to McMillan, and for a Jet team that does not have a viable X receiver, or really any viable pass catcher beyond Garrett Wilson right now, I think that's a team I would look for early in the second. I forget the exact pick, 30, somewhere in the late 30s, maybe 40, somewhere around there. I think that would be a perfect spot for Higgins to go to.
I would love that fit for him next to Garrett Wilson. Then, obviously, as I mentioned before, like when they lost Devontae Adams and let him go, you have Garrett Wilson and not much else in that receiving core right now. And I think Jaden Higgins would provide a really, really good weapon for them. So I don't even hate if they take Tyler Warren at 7 and then take Jaden Higgins in the second round. Like, it's just just add as many pass catchers as possible for that room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had the third worst grade for their tight ends last year in the league, and now Tyler Conklin's on the Chargers, and he was the starter. And they lost Devontae Adams, and they were dead last in intermediate receiving grade, mainly because their offense last year was simple as it gets. It was either slants or back shoulders, so there was really no in between. We'll see what Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand want in this offense, but I think Higgins would solve a lot of problems for him.
Absolutely. The last guy I'm going to go with here is another projected first-round pick in this year's draft. That is Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. Now, I'm going to go with a team that is not taking a first-round receiver since 2002.
You really want them to do it. I feel like every time we get on a show, you really want the Packers to take a wide receiver.
It has been 23 years since the Packers took a first-round wide receiver, even tight end there. So I would say Matthew Golden this year, go to the Green Bay Packers at number 23 overall. I think this guy, I'm a little more pessimistic than some people on whether or not he could be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. But the reason why I like him to the Packers specifically is I think what they're lacking right now, with Christian Watson especially coming off the injury, they need a true downfield threat. And Matthew Golden maybe wasn't allowed to be as much of it because of the quarterback problems that Texas had this past year. But like we said before, he ran a 4.29 in the 40-yard dash. We know he's got the speed to get downfield on you. So I think the Packers receiving core is really redundant in a lot of ways with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Dontayvion Wicks and guys like that. You had a guy like Matthew Golden who at least got the speed to take the top off of defenses. They need that, right? Because Jordan Love's a guy who loves to take deep shots. Matt LaFleur's a guy who loves to call deep shots a lot as well. I think Matthew Golden, he wasn't much of a deep receiver at Texas, but I do think he's got the speed to be more than that in the NFL. I think that fit in the first round of the draft would make a lot of sense to me for the Green Bay Packers, more so than an Emeka Egbuka, for example, who would, again, be very similar to a lot of things the Packers already have in their receiving core. I think Matthew Golden would provide a different element to the receiving core.
Whole lot of possession receivers over there. I'm trying to pull up the team grades on deep receiving grades for everybody here. The Green Bay Packers, where are they? I'm trying to find them. Fine print. 10th in deep receiving grade, which is interesting to me. But I'm with you. I think they could use that speed element. I think it's something. Now, again, there are teams sitting back on him also last year because they know Jordan Love wants to throw those deep balls. And Christian Watson, look, as talented as he is, it's the injuries, right? I mean, there's just constantly a hamstring, an ankle, or something, this or that lower body. And if they don't have Watson out there, things do start to get stagnant, right? And they have to adjust with the other guys in the shorter game. But I think Golden to be able to really take the top off the defense and then to have Jordan Love get back to the patient approach that worked for him in the second half of 2023, it's going to be a big deal here. I mean, obviously they spent big money on the offensive line with Aaron Banks. They're trying to protect him. But, the combination of Jordan Love understanding when to take those deep shots. And then you mentioned it. Having guys you can take those deep shots with, especially if Christian Watson's going to continue to not be healthy through a whole season, it is a good option. I doubt they're going to do it because we've had 20-plus years of them not doing it. But I do appreciate you calling your shot on that one because it is an option. Look, they have needs at receiver, at edge, and at corner. So 3 spots you really don't want to have needs at, and they've made the playoffs the last 2 years. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, but it certainly would be an option.
And Christian Watson would be that deep threat for them. Like I said, he's been battling injuries his entire career. And even when he's on the field, Don, he's been kind of an inconsistent player as well. And his ball tracking ability has been kind of the big problem with him back at North Dakota State and even in the NFL too. So I think that's another reason why they could look to a guy like Matthew Golden to be more of a reliable deep threat than Christian Watson was. So before we wrap up, Dom, we got to talk about some of the guys that we want to, the sleeper wide receivers in this class. Not in the top 10 of Trevor's rankings, and maybe more guys that are going to be day 3 prospects in the NFL draft, but still guys that Dalton and I really, really like in this wide receiver class. So who's your first sleeper wide receiver in the 2025 draft?
I've got a later one. I've got one that Trevor and I disagree with a little bit. He's got him outside the top 200, I think. I have a couple of guys like that, but one of them I have bias to. So I started the last segment with somebody going to Las Vegas. This one I'm going to have somebody coming from Las Vegas, and that's Ricky White from UNLV. Look, this is someone 6'1", 190, doesn't blow you away with speed, but I think he's just a really smooth route runner at this level, right? I mean, obviously playing in the group of 5, and he was a high-volume target, but he's been efficient, whether it's outside. They started using him inside in the slot more, really competitive player, adds special teams value as well. I've never seen the best player on a team like it is with UNLV and Ricky White. Usually if they're going to be on the punt return team, they're going to be the returner. No, this guy was out there blocking punts. I think it was it 4 of them this year that he had, plus one more against Syracuse that he technically didn't block because the punter held onto it and all that. But I think Ricky White's a smooth football player. I think there's a little bit of his route running. He's not quite on the same level, but it's a little bit in the style of Rashee Rice, the way he was at SMU. I think for me, he was 220 on our big board right now. I would have him higher than that. I might take him, you're talking somewhere in the 5th round, but I think Ricky White's a good player to have on your football team between the receiving ability and the special teams. He doesn't blow you away with traits. He's got to be a little more physical. He's kind of got a thinner build to him, but I think he's somebody I would take a chance on day 3.
Yeah, it wasn't a great combine for Ricky White, but I do think he's a really productive player over the last couple of years. 90.8 PFF grade over the last 2 years. 2nd most receiving yards in the country over the last 2 years. 2nd only to Tetairoa McMillan as well. So does a nice job of finding the soft spots in zone coverage. He's dangerous after the catch too. And like I said, he's a really, really good special teamer too. But and solid athlete at best. He didn't really test out that well at the combine. He's not a great separator one-on-one either, but I do like Ricky White as a guy who went for you on special teams and as a blocker. And he's one of the most productive players in college football over the last few years as well. So I think that, a guy who's going to be picked on day 3, you got to contribute on special teams, and we've seen Ricky White do it. So I think that is definitely a very important factor for him. So I do like to shout out for Ricky White, too, because I do think he's a really good college player and should be drafted somewhere in the NFL draft. The guy I want to shout out, Dalton, is Tez Johnson from Oregon. Now, I understand Tez Johnson is quite literally the lightest player we've ever seen at the NFL Combine. He checked in at 154 pounds. That is very light. And he only ran like a 4.5 in the 40-yard dash. So that's not great either. However, he is one of the best separators that we have in this year's draft. Over the last 2 years, a 100th percentile separation rate at 93%, 97th percentile against single coverage as well. And that showed up all week at the Senior Bowl against some of the best corners in America. He was lined up against Azareye'h Thomas on a few reps. And Azareye'h Thomas has a massive size advantage on Tez Johnson. So obviously, he tried to play press coverage on Tez Johnson. But with Tez Johnson's releases and his route running, he got open consistently against one of the best press man corners in this year's draft. So I still like Tez Johnson a lot. And the other thing, too, not a great combine for Tez Johnson, but his athleticism shows up on the field. In our gas metric, 99th percentile, elite quickness for the position. He gets out of his breaks with ease. He has the 1,300 yards after the catch over the last 2 years, most in the nation by nearly 200 yards. So it's really dangerous after the catch as well. And he's a high IQ player, and he finds soft spots in zone coverage. Now, again, very light player, 154 pounds, not a blazing fast player either, with only a 4.5 40-yard dash. So that is a question mark. He's quite literally the lightest receiver we've ever seen at the NFL Combine. But I think his separation ability and his production after the catch and the fact that he's more athletic on tape than he was at the Combine deserves to still be drafted somewhere. I still could see him being a starting slot receiver in the NFL.
No, absolutely. I'm with you. It's tough with him because you just sit there and you go, is it possible? Right?
Yeah.
150. Max, I haven't been 154 pounds since, I believe, the 9th grade. Yeah. I think I was in 9th grade the last time I was 154 pounds. So I think about that. But then you watch him run routes, and you watch, especially when he gets clean into his route breaks at the top of his routes, it's filthy. I mean, the ability for him to separate at the top of his routes is just crazy. So, and he showed it at the Senior Bowl, too, against the top competition. He was nasty down there, too. He was separating from everybody. So, is he going to get drafted? Sure. Would it even be fun if he got drafted by, say, the Denver Broncos with Bo Nixon? That would be just a fun story, right? But he can be productive. But, again, the Texans tested this with Tank Dell, and aside from the injuries, he's been really good. And Johnson's even significantly smaller than Dell. I don't know that it can work. It's going to be a fun story to watch. I think because he's chalked up that such a light weight there, it's probably dropped him down a lot of boards a little bit to where he's going to be a day 3 pick. But he's somebody on day 3 you could take a chance on just to see if it's possible and if that route running can hold up in the NFL.
Absolutely, yeah. I like Tez Johnson a lot. For anyone who doesn't know why we think the Broncos would be such a fun fit, not only because he played with his college quarterback in Bo Nix's family actually took in Tez Johnson when they were kids. Tez Johnson played the same high school as Bo Nix, and obviously they played together at Oregon too after Tez transferred in there from Troy. So it'd be really, really cool for Tez to reunite with the guy that he really grew up with in Bo Nix as his quarterback too. So I think that would be a really, really cool story if the Broncos can grab him somewhere, probably at day 3 of the NFL draft. Who's another sleeper in this class, Dalton, that you really like at wide receiver?
Staying in the vein of, and I'm actually going to do this twice here, undersized slot receivers, and I've got one from Virginia Tech who athletically is kind of a monster, and the problem is you don't see the surface level production because at Virginia Tech they had a very hard time throwing the football. First of all, it's a run heavy offense anyway, but also their quarterback situation there with Kyron Drones and some other guys they had throwing this year just struggled to complete passes. But Jalen Lane, 5'10", 190, tore it up at the combine, ran a 4.34 40 with a 1.5 flat split, 40-inch vert, 11 foot broad, 6.75 in the 3-cone, and the 99th, you just mentioned it with Tez Johnson, a 99th percentile separation rate this year. despite the receiving grades being low, because I'll be honest, this is the type of player that gets kind of missed a little bit with the receiving grades, because some of that, a good chunk of it is based on production. But when you look at the tape and just the number of missed throws that there were at Virginia Tech when Jalen Lane was open, you're talking about somebody who I think, again, because you missed the surface level production, but an athlete, a separator, and somebody who just needs a better quarterback situation, that's somebody that gets taken on day 3 and is a sleeper slot receiver here. So I think Jalen Lane, the more I watched him, I was like, man, he's a burner. He's a real burner, and I think you're missing out a little bit if you don't at least take a look at this guy sometime early to mid day 3, because it's just really, when you look at his lack of production, to me, it just came down to the quarterback situation. Virginia Tech just could not throw the football this year. He only had 39 catches this year, I believe the number, 38 or 39 catches. Certainly, if Virginia Tech threw the football more and if they had a functional passing situation, he would have had a lot bigger numbers than that, because he can really play. He can really run routes and separate underneath as well.
Absolutely. I really like Jalen Lane. I think he's one of the best separators we have in this year's draft. And again, one of the most important parts of playing wide receiver is just getting open, and Jalen Lane is one of the best in the class at getting open too. So it could be a big-time sleeper and a guy that teams really like to get on day 3 of the NFL draft. All right, another guy I want to shout out here is Pat Bryant from Illinois. This is a guy who, not the best athlete overall, but really, really strong hands for the position, really good in contested catch situations as well. Only a 1.8% drop rate this past year. He's a really, really good blocker as well for the position. He's above the rim type of pass catcher as well. He's a guy who can make contested catches. And it actually showed more nuance in his route running than you would think for someone of his size. Now, he's not the best separator one-on-one. Again, not the best athlete either, and doesn't have a great long speed. But I think he could be a rotational X receiver, very strong receiver, good hands as well, and really good blocker. I think this is a guy that you just want on your football team. Again, he won't be a starting receiver in the NFL, but I do like him as a guy who could be a contributor somewhere on day 3 of the NFL draft as like a rotational receiver.
No, I agree, absolutely. I think there's certainly talent there. He came on this year because Illinois finally got some pass protection and allowed their quarterback to throw the football to him. But Bryant had a very nice season. I think you mentioned it. I think the body control helps him. I think he's a good, solid possession receiver. Got to get a little bit quicker in and out of the routes. I don't think he had the best Senior Bowl of the group down there, but certainly someone, again, I think early on day 3 you could take a gamble on and see what he can do on the outside for you.
Absolutely. All right, who's another sleeper in this class that you like?
All right, now we're getting to the super small slot receivers. Not quite Tez Johnson small, but not that far off, and you knew I was going to do this. Anytime I get to bring up an FAU legend, I'm going to do it. LeJontay Wester from Colorado spent this last year at Colorado. Look, measured in, I get it, only at 5'10", 163, but certainly plays bigger than that, has some punt return ability, was first-team All-AAC in 2023, absolutely tore it up, was one of the best slot receivers in the country his last year, really all of his years at FAU, especially the last 2 that he was at FAU. And then you saw this year at Colorado, it took him a little bit of time to get going, and then there was the famous play, the Hail Mary against Baylor, that tied the game, and Colorado eventually won the game. But he really became their second best receiver as it went on. Now, the lack of size, he's going to be a slot-only player. He's quick. He's very underrated also, I think, in contested catch situations. He's super competitive. Let me see the career contested catch rate. Talking about a guy who's 5'10", 163 at a 49% contested catch rate. I mean, he's competitive, solid runner, quick player. A 4.46 might have been actually better than I thought he was going to run at the combine. And again, I think he's somebody probably that has to start out as a punt returner. I think he could make a roster as a punt returner and then work his way into being a slot receiver. But you knew I had to mention the FAU guys when I can, and he's certainly one that went to Colorado this year and had a very good season. I thought he was their second best receiver behind Travis Hunter as the year went on. And if he gets a shot in the 6th or 7th round, I wouldn't be that shocked. But I think that's where it starts, is make a roster as a punt returner, work your way into the slot, and see where the role goes from there.
Yeah, again, he's a smaller player, but I do like LeJontay Wester. He's been a productive player over the last 2 years at Colorado and at FAU. And Travis Hunter obviously gets a lot of love in that Colorado receiving corps, but there were some other really, really talented players in that receiving corps, and LeJontay Wester is absolutely one of them. So I love that shout out there for LeJontay Wester. Of course, you have to do it with the FAU connection as well. My last guy I want to shout out is, again, one of the guys that one of our commenters shouted out earlier, and they know ball, obviously, Dalton, because Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas. I'm a big fan of this guy, honestly. He's been a really productive player in college football this year. He was the 5th most valuable receiver in the nation, according to our wins above average metric. 89.4 receiving grade you see right there. That was tied for 4th among all receivers in college football. Good size, 6'4", 202 pounds. He caught 54% of his contested targets over the last 2 years and a 90th percentile drop rate over the last 2 years. Very, very strong hands. Really good job of finding the soft spots in zone coverage. And you want to look at against top competition. Against Tennessee and against Ole Miss. Ole Miss, obviously Trey Amos, one of the top corners in this year's draft. Tennessee is one of the top corners in next year's draft in Jermon McCoy. Learn the name now. In those two games, and he was really guarded by those two players a lot in those two games, he had nearly 300 combined receiving yards against Ole Miss and Tennessee. So he produced against top competition as well. One of the biggest sleepers in this year's draft, and a lot of people don't even think he's going to be a drafted player in the 2025 NFL draft, but he's produced against incredibly good competition and great size, great hands for the position. Not the best separator, not the best after the catch, but I think he's worth a flyer somewhere on day 3 of the NFL draft for how productive he was at Arkansas this past year. Like I said, he was one of the most efficient, one of the best receivers in the nation. And yet he's talked about as like a day 3, maybe even a UDFA type of player. I'm a big fan of Andrew Armstrong, man. I think he will be a big-time sleeper in this year's draft.
So I'm with you on this. I'm going to give you all the credit for this one because there was a point when we were watching wide receivers, and you said to me, hey, watch Andrew Armstrong. And I'm with, because Isaac Tesla, his teammates, he's the one that's been getting all of the hub lately for having a really good combine, having a really good athletic profile. But Armstrong was by far the more productive of the two, and I think he would work. I think he works best. You mentioned it, beating zone coverage in the intermediate parts of the field. I think that's where he would work best. I think about it in a lighter version of, okay, if you're a team that really wanted Jaden Higgins and didn't get him on day 2, I think you could look in the 5th and 6th round at an Andrew Armstrong. He's got really good size. He was really productive this year with, again, finally a decent quarterback situation with Taylor Green. I was just looking at it while you were finishing the rant there. Number 350 on the consensus board right now. I think it's just
that's not draftable, by the way.
Right, not even close. I mean, I think
100 picks away from being drafted.
I think people are missing out because I look at a bunch of these names in front of him, and when I watched Armstrong, I went back and said, yeah, he's better than these guys. Mm-hmm. I think I don't know what's missing. I don't know exactly. Is it do we have athletic numbers? Do we have a lack of a 40 time or what? What is the deal here if we can find that, even if it's from Arkansas's pro day? Because I think he's better than a lot of these guys. To be at number 350, I mean, that's basically talking about he cleanly shouldn't be drafted. But I'm with you. I think he's a guy who should go in the middle of day 3.
He, in the relative athletic score, he scored at 8.49. So according to Kentley, plays an 85th percentile athlete at wide receiver.
6'4", 202, 4.51 40.
Yeah.
37.5-inch vert, 10.4 broad. I think maybe it's just because they've been watching Tesla and he really tore up the combine and you know, I think he's a decent player too, but I think there's somebody out there missing the boat on Armstrong. I think this is somebody, again, I think as high as maybe round 5 you could really think about as an alternative, again, to Higgins, as a possession, big-bodied X-receiver. I think that's where he would work best. I don't even think he got to show that as much as he could have at Arkansas because their offense is very much like run the ball and take shots way downfield. And he's got a good idea of how to get himself open, much like Higgins does on the deep ball, more so with his technique and his size than blazing speed. 4.51 is good, but it's not going to blaze by a lot of guys, especially now with the way NFL corners are. But I'm with you. I think he's somebody that's missing on a lot of people's boards. And 350 on consensus basically, to me, means that I don't think a whole lot of people are watching him because he's really good. I'm with you. You get all the credit. If he winds up being a solid day 3 player for somebody, you're getting all the credit.
I appreciate that. So, yeah, if you want a sleeper in this year's draft, well, he might even be a UDFA, honestly, for the 2025 NFL draft. I would take Andrew Armstrong in the 4th or 5th round, honestly.
Yeah, I compare him to another big receiver that was a UDFA from Arkansas, Matt Landers, who was really much more of a size speed guy and I think had didn't have as much polish on his route running as Armstrong does and wasn't. Landers had a very tall and thin build. I think Armstrong is a thicker built guy who, again, can work in those intermediate areas in an offense that lets him, because intermediate throws weren't really prevalent in Arkansas's offense. It's just a certain way that they run things, and that's what happens when you get to, we get to watch the college football all year. We do the college show all year, and we have an idea of like, okay, maybe these guys would work better in a different offense because these offenses, just like with Jalen Lane, he doesn't get the ball much because A, they don't throw the ball that much, and B, they don't throw it effectively very well at all. So breaking some of these things down and finding where players can succeed, I think can help you find some of those some of those sleepers on day 3 like this. I'm with you on Armstrong. He's pretty good.
Absolutely, yeah. 85th percentile athlete, and he was a top 5 receiver in the nation according to our advanced metrics, and he played in the SEC as well. So that's a draftable player to me, and the fact that he's number 350 on the consensus board, I think he's a big time sleeper in this year's draft. But that wraps up our wide receiver episode for the 2025 NFL Draft. Listen in the comments below what you thought about PFF's rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft at the receiver position. Who are some of your favorite sleepers in this draft as well, and some of your favorite team fits for some of the top receivers in this year's class. For producers back there, and Tyler, Eli, and Quinn, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys very soon with more content surrounding the 2025 NFL Draft.